This is the story of one of the greatest innovators of our time. He had the ability to envision new products consumers didn't even know they wanted. He would go on to build a multi-billion-dollar technology company fueled by innovation. He was domineering, he drove his employees hard, and he rarely listened to other people's opinions. He was known to wear the same clothes every day. He was obsessed by design, and his products were beautiful, sleek, and iconic. He was not only a great innovator, he was a great marketer. He would turn new product demonstrations into dramatic showcases that attracted endless publicity. He believed that a successful company should be composed of managers and dreamers, and it was the responsibility of the former to protect the latter. He wasn't afraid to fail. But his board of directors wasn't as forgiving, and in a palace coup, eventually ousted him from the company he founded. His name was Edwin Land. He invented the instant camera and founded the Polaroid Corporation, and he was Steve Jobs' hero. Jobs considered Land one of America's greatest innovators. He once made a pilgrimage to meet Land at his lab in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There, Land told Jobs that technology should reside at the intersection of art and science. That philosophy made a deep impact on Jobs, and years later he would have 2 street signs saying art and science on the stage when he gave his dazzling new product demonstrations. Like Land, Jobs felt he could see the product as if it was sitting right there in the center of the table, and that it was his job to materialize it and bring it to life. Like Land, he pushed his employees to the limit, but he had an eye for dreamers. He too would build a multi-billion-dollar invention factory that would change the world. And, like Land, he would eventually be ousted from the company he founded. And above all, like Edwin Land, when you stack up Jobs' accomplishments, it is so easy to overlook his influence as a marketer. He was as obsessive about the craft of advertising as he was about technology. And when you analyze the decisions he made at each of the pivotal points in Apple's history, it is a profound lesson in marketing.
You're under the influence.
In just 56 short years on this planet, Steve Jobs managed to revolutionize 6 industries: personal computers, animated movies, music, phones, computing, and digital publishing. As his biographer Walter Isaacson notes, he even reimagined a 7th industry, retailing. For my money, Steve Jobs was the best marketer of our generation. It all started on April Fool's Day, 1976, when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started Apple Computers in the Jobs family garage. Their incorporation papers stated that the company was worth $5,309. 4 years later, it would be valued at $1.79 billion. When they launched the Apple I in 1976, then the highly successful Apple II in 1977, the era of the personal computer was born. It was one of those rare times in history when individuals could suddenly do things that only large groups with lots of money could do before. It was nothing short of a revolution. In 1981, when IBM entered the personal computer market, a plucky Steve Jobs ran a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal. It would be the first glimpse of the bold marketer Jobs would become. The headline said, "Welcome IBM, seriously." It was a savvy ad because it clearly implied Apple's position as the originator of the personal computer. But more importantly, it created the impression it was a 2-horse race between Apple and IBM. essentially ignoring all the other computer companies like Commodore, Tandy, and Osborne, who, by the way, were all doing as well as Apple at the time. Hot Shop Chiat Day was Apple's advertising agency. In the early days of their relationship, Jobs turned everything down they presented to him. In frustration, the agency told Jobs they needed to know what he thought was good. They had given up trying to read his mind. They needed a clue. Jobs paused and said, "The Beatles." That was the only clue they were ever given. 3 years later, when Jobs asked Chiat Day to come up with a commercial to launch the Macintosh, he asked for an idea that was, quote, a thunderclap. He wanted a TV commercial that would revolutionize advertising the way the Mac was about to revolutionize the computing world. It was a tall order. But the mighty Chiat Day answered the call and came back with a commercial that played off George Orwell's cryptic novel that predicted thought control. It positioned Apple as the computer of the individual and would call out IBM as the machine of the corporate overlords. The ad borrowed the title of the book, 1984. When the Apple board saw a preview of 1984, they hated it. But Steve Jobs loved it. It was as arrogant, flamboyant, and outrageous as Jobs himself. But here's where Jobs' unwillingness to compromise showed itself, even in his 20s. When the board demanded that Chiat Day sell the Super Bowl ad time, Jobs objected and offered to pay the $1.6 million out of his own pocket. Because of his unstoppable conviction, the Apple board relented, and the commercial ran in the third quarter of Super Bowl XVIII. Here is a rare video of Steve Jobs previewing the commercial to an audience of shareholders just before its Super Bowl launch.
IBM wants it all and is aiming its guns on its last obstacle to industry control, Apple. Will Big Blue dominate the entire computer industry? The entire information age? Was George Orwell right about 1984?
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the Information Purification Directives.
You have to watch this video of Jobs introducing that commercial, which you can see on our website.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
You can hear the crowd wildly cheering behind me, but what you can't see now is Jobs' face. It just may be the biggest smile ever displayed by a human being.
Good morning, Pirate.
That commercial would not only launch the Mac into the stratosphere, but it would also change the advertising industry forever. 1984 has been consistently voted as the best commercial of all time. It showed us that a TV ad could have production values on the scale of a motion picture. It showed us that a commercial could be news. While over 77 million people saw it on the Super Bowl, all 3 major networks and 50 local stations did stories about it later that evening, where it's estimated that an additional 43 million people saw it. The press gave it a viral life unprecedented in the pre-YouTube era. 1984 also single-handedly ushered in the age of Super Bowl event commercials that continues to this day. But above all, it was a perfect expression of Steve Jobs' mission. He wanted to create products that changed the world. That notion, that idea, that quest is what has drawn people to Apple ever since. In a recent survey that measures the emotional attachment of consumers to the top 100 brands in the world, the iPod and the iPhone ranked numbers 1 and 2, and Apple occupied a full 1/3 of the top 12 rankings on the list. And that is why Steve Jobs pressed so hard to make sure 1984 aired. because it would establish a platform that would resonate for over 30 years. But not long after that triumph, Jobs was fired from Apple in May of 1985. He wouldn't return for another 12 years.
'Cause I gotta have faith. I gotta have faith. Because I got to go for faith. I got to have faith. Baby.
When Jobs was fired from Apple, ad agency Chiat